Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans all over the world, welcome once again to another edition of Ask Chuck Dixon. I am Chuck Dixon, and this is your opportunity to ask me questions. Questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books. So let's not waste any time. Let's get to your questions. Rex Moss, in your podcast, you seem very enthusiastic about working in the Rippaverse. That is communicated in Alpha Core number 1. I hear that you like working out the logistics and building a city. In the future Rippaverse books, are you allowed to work on building out North America? Well, funny you should ask. I mean, one of the main reasons Eric brought me in and brought in Mike Baron and the Saskas as well is to help flesh out the Rippaverse universe. And in Alpha Core, I began, building out and creating consistencies within the city of Florispark. And with the Horsemen, I continued to do that, adding little details to the continuity, to what the city is about. In addition to the groundwork that Eric has already laid down, and also, Mike in Gooding and the Saskas in Yara. But anyway, we're all playing nice and working together. But the and things will expand with the arrival of Zaylin early next year. Our cosmic character created by me and Joe Bennett. But even more so is a project. It's a 2-part graphic novel. I don't know if Eric has announced the name of it yet. It's a 2-part graphic novel. It's epic length. It's going to be well over 200 pages long when it's complete, and it goes back a generation to explain the world of Rippaverse, the nature of what, how did Texas become an independent state? What is the political landscape? And it's somewhat analogous, somewhat allegorical to what's going on in the United States today. But this is a separate alternate universe, not really meant to reflect the world we live in. It's like the DC universe. It's one step removed from our reality. This allows us to get crazy with stuff, obviously. But in this 2-part series, 2-part graphic novel, there will be a lot of background stuff provided and a lot of explanation of the politics and ultimately the warfare that leads to the Texas succession from the rest of the United States. And also it'll present, I don't think I'm giving anything away here, the origin of Brian Solari and how he came to have his powers, and the differentiation between different kinds of exceptionals within the Ripper universes. It's going to be an info dump, but an entertaining one with lots of action. The artwork on it is stunning. I don't think Eric has announced the artist yet, so I won't reveal that here. The artwork is absolutely stunning, and I couldn't be happier with the project as a whole. And we introduce a great new meta villain, and it just really tells an epic story. We get to see a lot of the characters you already know and love a generation earlier, younger versions of themselves, and how they came to be where they are in the Rippaverse today. And I wish I could be more specific, but Eric, this is Eric's company, and he gets to announce the stuff as he wants to announce it and hype it as he wants to hype it. And I wouldn't do anything to mess with that, because he's been doing such a damn good job, and the results are in. These books are selling very well, so I don't want to get in the way of any of Eric's marketing plans. Eric and his crew. He's got a very talented crew of folks putting together these campaigns, and I don't want to reveal anything too early, although I'd love to. We'll come back and talk about it when these things are released, for sure. I'm sure there'll be a ton of questions when these things get released. Nick, if DC ever regains its senses, I'm not holding my breath, and scraps all the woke and DEI nonsense and asks you to be a new editor for the Batman titles, would you accept? Yeah, it's pretty much a hard no. I would have to probably take a pay cut. Well, since there aren't DC Comics audiences, I guess I wouldn't have to relocate. I could edit a line of Batman comics right here where I'm sitting, in my my little office here outside Tampa, Florida. But yeah, I wouldn't have a lot of interest in that. But you're going to keep asking me about it, aren't you? In your twin spin. Nick is back with, continuing from the previous question, if you would accept the editor position, what are some of the changes you would do to the Batman main and family titles? Would you bring the 90s back or something original? Any specific creators you would consider hiring? Yeah, I wouldn't bring the 90s back. You don't want to go back and do what you did before. I mean, I've never really thought about this because I don't anticipate ever getting to write these characters again. But, yeah, I would. The thing about Batman is it's not hard to find talented people to do Batman because everybody in comics wants to do Batman, even if it's just for a little while. I mean, Batman is, in American mainstream comics, Batman is the big show. And you want to spend some time at the big show. And it wouldn't be hard. But what I would do, and this relates to a question coming up later on, is I would insist to the creators that each of the Bat titles have its own tone. I would go back to the Bat titles being separate entities from each other, each with their own flavor and their own tone. And I think the first thing I would do is bring back Brave and Bold with Batman meeting different characters, and also try to figure out some major Batman crossovers with other characters from either other comic companies or movie franchises. Because as I've said in the past, crossovers always get attention drawn to characters because everybody's curious about a crossover. If you have, Batman meet the Tick, I'm just looking around my room at action figures. Batman meets Doctor Strange. I mean, why the hell not? If you're any kind of comic fan like me, you would be, well, I want to at least take a look at that. I'm curious about how that would work out. And I would do a bunch of them to basically announce, hey, there's a new sheriff in town. We're changing the things we're doing. And I would also probably want to pare down the Batman family because there's so darn many of them now. It's got to get confusing. And to me, a large cast like that, all in one book or spread across 4 or 5 monthly titles, it gets a little soap opera-y, a little lazy because you've got this huge ensemble cast, and you can, trust me, you can pad a story out a lot by simply visiting each one of those characters for a couple of pages here and there, just to include them in the story, even though they have nothing to do with the story. So I would probably pare that down. Not get rid of them necessarily or anything else, but maybe consign them to miniseries or whatever. Basically, ask different creators, look, Batman Jr. or whatever, whatever family member have been added in the last decades. I would probably say to different creators, look, have you got an idea for a take on this character? Would you want to do like a 4-issue miniseries and see what you can do to make this character interesting? Or have you ever wanted to write this character? And sort of get them out of the main Bat titles into their own titles. Much the way Nightwing was given his own title. Because you didn't want him in the books all the time. Because that's a little, you're trying to find a place for him in your story when maybe he doesn't have a place in the story. So if any of that makes sense at all. Lewis Porter Jr., why is it that originally, when characters had multiple books, they seemed to focus on very different genres? See, I told you we were going to get to this. For example, Amazing Spider-Man focused on very traditional superhero stuff, while Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, focused on greedy crime drama. That worked the same way with Batman being the traditional superhero comic and Detective Comics being the more detective-based book. Um, I don't think these things were by design. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there when they created Spectacular Spider-Man. But I imagine that it was left up to the first writer on Spectacular Spider-Man and kind of set the tone, or maybe a tone set in over time. Um, when you write professionally and create professionally, one of the biggest surprises that comes upon you early on is how much the work kind of takes on a life of its own, and it speaks for itself. Denny O'Neil used to talk about characters who get away from you. You know, the character begins to take on a life of its own and just sort of moves away from your original vision. And that can be the same for books. And of course, once a writer establishes that tone for a book like Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and has sort of established a separate supporting cast for that title, even though the main character is the same, and a different series of threats in a different environment. Even when that writer leaves, the next writer is going to pick, if they're smart, they're going to pick up on that because they're going to go, well, this is what the readers expect from this title. I read them all, and I'm getting this idea that the tone for this book is X. You know, it's like you said, greedy crime stories or detective stories or whatever. So I'm going to stay with that, darker, more street level tone on this book because that's what the readers have come to expect. And you can see that tone takes over the book, and it kind of does it on its own, and it just establishes itself through success. Well, trust me, if Spectacular Spider-Man sales begin to droop a little, they would have said, well, we got to change direction. The readers don't like these darker noirish stories. We got to, move back to more blue sky superhero stories. But apparently they did. I mean, I know I did. There was a time period when I was regularly buying comics that I was no longer buying Amazing Spider-Man, and I was buying Spectacular Spider-Man because the stories interested me more because they were more street level and more complex, crime dramas and darker, and that appealed to me at the time. So, and same with Batman and Detective. Lewis Porter Jr. is back with how many of these characters have 4 books, and they all seem to be exactly the same, just different chapters in the run. Why don't comic companies break off these stories into different genres again instead of having just one story flow through 4 books? Now, I was not aware that that's what was going on. I'm assuming DC. I don't know, Spider-Man at Marvel, maybe the same thing, where during a month you might get a 4-part story all in one month in that title. So the titles just sort of run through each other, and this is easier from a writing standpoint, I suppose. It takes more coordination, particularly if it's not all the same writer. I can't imagine that their same writer is writing 4 or 5 books a month. There's not a lot of guys built that can do that. But what this does, why this is attractive to the companies, DC and Marvel, is because it makes it easier to push all of those titles onto the retailer. And remember, DC and Marvel, they don't sell comic books to you. They sell comic books to the owner of your local comic shop. They got to sell him first, or you're never going to see what they're putting out. If he doesn't buy it, you can't buy it either. So it won't be in the store. So they want to make these things as simple as possible. Of course, they make all kinds of deals. If you buy X amount of these, we'll give you 50 of these free. There's all kinds of backroom stuff that can be done to push books. But the idea is, if the story runs through all 4 titles or all 5 titles, then you're bringing the sales numbers on those titles closer together. So there's not a big gap between one and the other. So you're telling all one story. And so the retailer's got to buy, hopefully, he's going to buy 100 copies of each of these. It doesn't always break down that way, but because even going back, if you look at sales figures, and the best example presented before, Batman and Detective. Okay, same character, same stories, same cast, but Batman always sold significantly more than Detective Comics. And this is true even when they were on the newsstand. If you go back, there's a significant gap between the sales of Batman and the sales of the Detective. And I know it doesn't make any sense. And even when DC would put Detective Comics in little letters and Batman in big letters, it didn't seem to fool anybody. And sales were still lower on Detective. When I took over Detective, I understood I'm never going to sell as much as Batman. And no matter what we do. So, I mean, they could have put, 2 high school kids with little talent on Batman, and it still would have outsold Detective. It is the way the retailers order it. And so what you want to do is get rid of that gap. And that's why they'll have a story run through all the titles. It's why you do intercompany crossovers too. It lifts all boats. Somebody that doesn't want to read Captain Potato Salad now has to read it because it's part 19 of that year's big crossover. And so he's got to buy, he's got to hold his nose and buy Captain Potato Salad because he needs the rest of that story. And that's what they do. So now this subject came up at the last really big Bat Summit that I was at. And Denny presented his big idea for that Bat Summit was that we do precisely this thing, that each month one story would run through Batman, Shadow of the Bat, and Detective. And one writer would write that month. And so we would alternate. So I would write a month of Batman. Alan would write a month of Batman. Doug would write a month of Batman. And he presented this to us, and I strongly objected. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I said, I would have to write a story that would work for, Graham Nolan, Kelly Jones, and whoever was drawing Shadow of the Bat at the time. And I said, I hate this idea because I can't, there's no visual consistency. Because particularly Kelly and Graham, they're polar opposites. I mean, their interpretations of Batman are both wonderful, but they don't gel. They don't mix each other. And I said, and look, Alan's doing his thing on Shadow of the Bat, and Doug is doing his thing with this like more gothic, horror-oriented interpretation of Batman, with Kelly Jones. And I said, why would we want to ruin that? Why would we want to break that up? And then he explained, well, it'll bring our sales closer together, just what I explained to you. And he said to me, and besides, you'll be making Batman royalties. You'll be making more royalties each month that you do this. And I could tell Doug wasn't very happy because he was going to be losing the Batman royalties, but he didn't say anything. They left it up to me to take the slings and arrows from Denny. And we didn't really get into an unfriendly argument about it. But Denny was quite taken aback. And he said, well, this is kind of what I wanted to bring up at this summit. This is what this summit was going to be about. How were we going to work out each one of these arcs? And I said, well, obviously I'll do it, but I said, I'm not going to be very happy about it, because I'm really digging what I'm doing. And I know Doug and Alan are digging what they're doing. And of course, as you can see, Graham was at this summit with us. And I could tell, he wanted to speak up, but I was basically taking all the air out of the room. Because Graham is not shy. And I could see he was not happy about this. Because he was liking what we were doing together. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so Denny's like, well, this is what I presented to Paul Levitz, the head of DC at the time. And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. So Denny went into another room, but we could still hear him. And he called Paul. We could hear all of it. And we're sitting there just sort of listening to what he's saying to Paul, half of one phone conversation. And then he said, you're not going to believe this, but a writer is turning down getting paid more royalties, referring to me. And he says, we're going to have to change plans and everything else. And Paul said, well, if that's the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. Paul saw, the logic, but Paul never wanted to get in the way of creativity. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Our sales numbers were fine. There was no real imperative reason to do this. I mean, these titles were not facing cancellation or anything. And so then he comes back in the room and says, well, I guess we're going to do this a different way. And it didn't inconvenience anybody, and it didn't change the nature of the summit, because Doug already had ideas of what he wanted to do. I already had ideas of what I wanted to do. And of course, Alan had a direction for his book for the year. So that's the way we went. So we all just went our separate ways again. But of course, we laid everything out to make sure we weren't repeating one another's stories, or, because you want to say, well, I want the Riddler for these months. And Doug's like, well, I want the Penguin for these months. And there we go. And it might have been at this summit that I suggested a change in direction for the Penguin. And, and various things were brought up, and it was a more free, easy, less formatted, less, you can see there's whiteboards in the background, but less of the whiteboard stuff than we usually had at a summit. It was more, each writer saying, this is where I want to go with the book. And then we would discuss, the ins and outs and pluses and minuses of all that. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm making it clear. I don't like the idea of just a unistory just running for months and months and months in a book like a soap opera. You got to break it up. You got to give creators their way, because who knows, they might stumble on something wonderful rather than just writing as directed. Twin spin. That's not a twin spin. Why did I put that in there? Sean Danker, you said before that Batman shouldn't kill and Superman shouldn't because he's an aspirational figure, but what about Wonder Woman? Do you think she too is an aspirational figure like Supes and therefore shouldn't kill? What did you think about her turning into a Punisher-like figure, saying she doesn't have a rose gallery because she'd make sure they stay down? Yeah, Wonder Woman is an aspirational figure. It's kind of in her name, Wonder Woman. It kind of hints that she's exceptional. she's a paragon, much like Superman. No, she shouldn't kill. These are not. If you want to create an Amazonian goddess figure who kills, be my guest. Go create one. Greek mythology is filled, and Greek drama is filled with murderous women. So have at it. But not Wonder Woman. She's an icon. Just like Superman and Batman are an icon. Don't mess with that. A Wonder Woman that kills, to me, is frankly distasteful. And if you have a person that has superpowers, super abilities, either supernatural or science fiction based or whatever, and they go around killing their enemies, they're no longer a hero, they're a monster. Because if you have that kind of power, and that's one of the greatest things about the Superman character in particular. People, he's a Boy Scout and everything else. Well, thank God he's a Boy Scout. And how hard is it for Superman to remain a Boy Scout when he's basically omnipotent? You can't say no to Superman. And yet you can say no to Superman because his better angels will go, well, hey, I'm not in charge. I may be the biggest bully on the block, but I'm not going to bully anybody. I understand that I want to have a place in society. I don't want to be a top society, making the rules. I want to follow the rules. So it just behooves these characters to be on a higher moral plane than the rest of us. Not only because they're iconic superheroic figures who, for most of their very long careers, have not been lethal. These are also, and I'm going to say this again, and I know it hurts some of you adult fans, but these are childhood wish fulfillment figures. And we do not want our childhood wish fulfillment figures who appear on lunchboxes and ball caps and pajamas to be murderers. I don't know how many times I got to say this. And obviously, I'm not against characters who kill with ease. I've written tons of them. The vast majority of characters I've killed, from Conan, or written, from Conan to Levon Cade, have no problem knocking their enemies off by the bushel load. But not these three, and not the Flash, and not Green Lantern. You know, leave these characters alone. They should not kill. David Jordan, excluding your peers, Alan Grant, Doug mentioned, Denny O'Neil, who, in your opinion, are some of the best Batman writers? Kelly Puckett, I've praised Kelly to the rafters before. Kelly Puckett co-created the Cassandra Cain Batgirl along with Scott Peterson. And Kelly was not very prolific. Writing didn't come easy to Kelly for some reason. But everything that I'm speaking to him like he's gone. Well, as far as I know, he's written 100 novels. But when he was in comics, he didn't turn out half the work that I wish he'd turned out. I really look forward to his, and I don't say this a lot. If you watch these videos, I don't have a whole lot of high praise for a lot of comic book writers. But everything Kelly wrote was a gem. Maybe that's why it was so hard. He spent so much time polishing it and making sure it was perfect. And what he delivered each time was an absolutely perfect story. And more often than not, in his stories, I would go, damn, why didn't I think of that? He would really examine the aspects of these characters. He really put a lot of thought to them to try to present something fresh or new, or look at them from a different angle, or present a new facet, all without violating their core premise. He always worked within the framework when he was working in comics. I mean, I'm speaking about him in past tense, but this is when he worked in comics. I don't know what Kelly does now. I hope he is well and happy and loving what he's doing. And if he is writing comics, I'm not aware of it, and I apologize. But he just, terrific stuff, and just nothing but admiration for this guy and his approach, his conscientious approach to the work. Another guy whose work I enjoyed was Alan Brennert, who went on to write for television. I have a very good career writing for television, but for a short while wrote Batman stuff. And again, like Kelly, understood the characters and had a lot of fun with it. Was obviously a fan and wrote some terrific stuff. My favorite being this Brave and Bold issue that basically presents a Bronze Age team up with Batman and Catwoman, and a Silver Age story as well of Batman and Catwoman, and it's one of my favorite comics ever. But Alan did, he did arcs on Batman and Detective, and I think he wrote an annual or special. I can't remember. I'm not one of those fans that remember issues, numbers, and stuff like that. But I always look forward to seeing his name on a Batman comic, and his stuff was very good. And I know Denny held him in quite high esteem. Very, very good writer who got it, who got what Batman was about, and could write interesting stories that were accessible to younger readers, but also had enough meat there for an older reader to enjoy. And then, of course, there's Scott Peterson, who I mentioned previously. Scott wrote, a number of things within the Batman universe, but he did quite a few titles for the animated stuff. Gotham Adventures, Batman the Animated Series comic book. I think Adventures of Batman and Robin. I think he wrote some issues of that. And Scott, he was a longtime editor for me. One of my favorite editors I've ever worked with, but a longtime editor for me on numerous Batman-related titles. Our association on Nightwing was, wonderful. I mean, he was a large part of the success of that title. And but he wrote a lot of this stuff for the comics related to the cartoons. And again, like Kelly, like Alan Brenner, um, he was a fan. He got it. He could work within the framework and create fun, interesting, fast-paced stories with and particularly for the animated series, they were usually one-off stories. One-off stories they're not easy to write. They're not easy to write one-off. It's easier, an old saying amongst writers, it's always easier to write more than write less. But he brought it every month, and every month I look forward to reading these. Back when I was getting comps, it's a large part of the reason I don't read a lot of current comics is I don't get them free anymore. Once upon a time, a great big box would arrive from DC, and another one would arrive from Marvel, and it would be everything they had, everything they published, outside of hardcovers and trade paperbacks. But anyway, those are three guys whose Batman work I admire, and of course, going back to the earlier days, Bill Finger and guys like that. A lot of Gardner Fox stuff that I enjoyed when I was a kid. All good, solid Batman material that I based a lot of my own stuff off of. Joshua Ignatowski, what would you say is your favorite Submariner story and why? Yeah, I like Namor. It's strange. I mean, I've read in recent years a lot of people don't like this character because he's a bit of a prick, but that's why I love him. He's like James Bond. He's a bit of an a-hole, but I love him for that. One run I really enjoyed was in the 70s. Bill Everett, the original creator of Submariner, came back and did a bit of a run on Submariner's regular title, and his lush artwork and his fun approach to the character, and his introduction of new ancillary supporting characters and things like that just made this run a whole lot of fun. In fact, I got to go back and reread this run. I haven't read it in a while, and it was good. Another one I remember, it's a Roy Thomas story, drawn by Gene Colan, and it primarily is Submariner versus the crew of a submarine, and and a lot of it is told from the point of view of the guys in the submarine, and I think they were pirates. I can't remember. I don't. They were pirates or Russians or whatever. They were bad guys, and Namor is a little ticked at them. And I really like the story, and I think one of the reasons I like the story is from talking to writers who got to work with Gene Colan. Gene would kind of go off on his own a lot of times, and he would get interested in a particular visual aspect of the story and emphasize that and take up a lot of pages. If you look at a lot of Gene Colan's Bronze Age work, he'll open with splashes and double page spreads, and he'll end with like 8 and 9 panel pages at the end because he's trying to squeeze in the rest of the story. And I just really like Colan's or Kalan, I guess is how you actually say his name. I really like his storytelling style and how he got into this. And I know he was an old movie fan, and he probably really dug doing a submarine story. What is it about submarine stories? And of course, Fantastic Four Annual #1. Namor gets to be the big bad guy in the Fantastic Four's very first annual, and it features the armies of Atlantis invading New York City, and Kirby is Kirby magic, and I remember absolutely tormenting everybody to find this issue because I read a like a Spider-Man comic or something and had an ad for this, and in the ad it said now on sale, which of course meant nothing. It didn't mean it was literally now on sale. They had no control over really when these things would get released or when they would end up on the newsstand. And I remember, pestering everybody to look for this at the drugstore or newsstand. And one of my sister's boyfriends, so I had 2 older sisters, he found it and brought it to me. And I wish I could remember his name. I'm forever in his debt. But one of my favorite Namor stories. Twin spin for Joshua Ignatowski. What would you recommend as the best comics for a newcomer to get into Sergeant Rock, and where to go from there? Um, for me, Rock's greatest period was in the early 70s. And if you pick up any Sergeant Rock comic like 1970 to early in 74, you got comic book gold. Said it before, I'll say it again. American comics simply don't get better than this run on Sergeant Rock and this era in the DC war titles as a whole. Because of the Vietnam War and all the rest of it, I guess in the mind of Robert Kanigher, who was writing this title, he needed to sort of grow these stories up because they'd gotten a little bit silly through the Silver Age, to the point where Rock and company, they were getting in fist fights with the German army. All the characters were fighting each other like superheroes. They were getting in fist fights. They weren't gunning each other down. It wasn't reflecting the more brutal aspects of war, the sense of loss, the more, the gravitas of the subject of war wasn't being treated with the proper respect. And with so much war news on television and in the newspapers and the magazines, I assume Kanigher decided, because he was editor on these books as well, we're gonna make these a little more real. And so what evolves is, more realistic, more period accurate stories, a lot more emotional impact, a lot more heart, a lot more actual destruction and death and loss and all these other things. The horrors of war, as much as you can present them in a Comics Code comic, are presented in these. And so the stories become far more dramatic and far more memorable. And you begin with, a series of Joe Kubert stories, and then we move into Russ Heath. Russ Heath takes over the title, and for years, he and Kanigher create these mini masterpieces each month. Just absolutely gorgeous artwork. And in fact, I got a thing here. Absolutely gorgeous artwork. Heath's painstaking research to get all of the weaponry and uniforms and everything absolutely period accurate. And often Heath writing. Heath wrote a number of the most memorable of the Rock stories in this run. And like I said, overall, the DC war titles, it was the golden era for these titles, because you had, John Severin working on a regular basis on these titles. Norman Maurer, George Evans, Alex Toth. You had The Unknown Soldier, you had Haunted Tank, Sam Glanzman and Archie Goodwin doing a long run in this period. And, so if you start 1970 Sergeant Rock, you can't go wrong. Every issue is gold. And of course, I think these things are rather expensive now. I just wish DC would collect them, do a 70s run of these books, because they deserve it. The level of storytelling, the level of the writing, and everything else, and all of this was reflected in sales. Sergeant Rock and Jonah Hex were DC's biggest selling titles in this time period. They were outselling Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman to a remarkable degree. And it's all due to the quality of the writing, quality of the art was there, and readers were responding to it, because readers always respond to quality. When they realize, hey, this is a good thing, I'm going to look for this title next month, and I'm going to keep buying it until it's, the quality dips. And of course, eventually on Sergeant Rock, the quality did dip as Kanigher leaves DC for the most part, and largely superhero editors, disinterested superhero editors, take over the war titles, and they eventually just sink into oblivion. Although for a time period, Kubert was also editor. And I think during a large part of the Heath run here, Kubert was the editor on the war titles, and according to Russ Heath, quite the taskmaster. Joe Joe was a little difficult to work with because or work for, because he expected you to be as fast as him and as competent as him all the time, and that was a bit of a cross to bear for Russ. But anyway, that's an aside. These are absolutely amazing comics. I cannot recommend them highly enough if you can find them. They used to be in the dollar bins all the time. It's just not true anymore. Triple Spin. You're getting the full treatment this week, Josh. Do you have any favorite Christmas or Thanksgiving movies? I can only think of one Thanksgiving movie. There must be one or two I'm forgetting. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, just incredible. I just recently got a new 4K transfer of this. Can't wait to see it. I will definitely watch this one before Thanksgiving. It's a John Hughes. Never seen it. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Like a lot of John Hughes productions, plagued with nothing but production problems throughout. It's amazing this movie ever got made. But it's a wonderful, wonderful story. It's extremely funny. John Candy and Steve Martin are terrific together. And, it's a typical John Hughes story in that it's splendid and it has heart. There's a story plot to it, so the comedy has something to hang on to rather than just being a series of vignettes or gags. And there's a terrific through story with a fantastic resolution at the end. It's just super duper stuff. And of course, Christmas Story. I'm a big fan of Gene Shepard. Used to listen to him back when he was on the radio, telling his stories about his childhood and basically sharing his world philosophy. But this is a good one, remains a good one, and worth reviewing. And if I had guilty pleasures, this would be one, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which is basically a series of vignettes and gags, but I love it. It's a terrific comic cast in top form. And I watched each year just to see Clark Griswold's rant about his boss after Christmas dinner when he finds out the crappy gift that he got as that year's bonus. That's it's a holiday highlight for me. See Chevy Chase going off. Now going back, of course, It's a Wonderful Life, amazing movie, a terrific American movie, and I like it for its noirish tones. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, it's over sentimental and schmaltzy, and yeah, it is kind of toward the end, but before you get there, it's very, very dark. I mean, it's a man contemplating suicide and being shown what his life meant to other people. And it's a terrific Christmas film that, if you know the history of it, bombed big time at the box office when it was released, and only became a classic, a Hollywood standard or holiday standard, because it fell into public domain. And every UHF station in the world that could get their hands on a print were running it. And so it just ran so often in the Christmas season that people, it got exposed to a much larger audience than it had ever had before. And people just kind of adopted it as one of their favorite films, and deservedly so. Staying in the 1940s, two Christmas movies with Barbara Stanwyck, which my wife and I we rewatch every year. Remember the Night is Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. Fred McMurray's a tough-talking, wise-cracking district attorney in New York City who allows parole for shoplifter Barbara Stanwyck over the Christmas holidays. And of course, the false assumptions are made about why he did that, but ultimately he and Stanwyck travel across the country to his home in Indiana, where the two of them spend the Christmas holidays with his mom and his aunt. And all that sounds kind of boring and everything else, but it's not. It's a terrific romantic comedy with a lot going for it, and fantastic performances, and a screenplay by Preston Sturges. And you simply don't get better than that for a Christmas movie. The other Barbara Stanwyck Christmas movie is Christmas in Connecticut, which is basically a farce set around Christmas time. Barbara Stanwyck is she's kind of the Martha Stewart of her day. She writes a magazine column about her married life and her child and everything else. And what is revealed early on in the movie is it's all fiction. She's made it all up. And then she discovers that the publisher that she works for, played by Sidney Greenstreet, wants to spend Christmas at her fabulous traditional American home. He wants to see a family holiday and spend it on. And so she must race along with her agent and her fiance to create this phony baloney family life, including finding a baby somewhere to pose as her own baby. It's a terrific farce. It's got a fantastic cast of Hollywood character actors, and it's all as well as being a screwball farce. It's also a fine romantic comedy, and performances throughout. Stanwyck is just fantastic. She's amazing in this movie, and it's a goodie. Christmas in Connecticut. Do not watch the remake, directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Do I have to say more? Quadruple spin. Look at you, Josh, all grown up. Have you ever participated in a National Novel Writing Month event or other similar writing challenge? If so, how was it? No, I as a writer, I always thought writers were loners, solitary figures. The idea of associating with other writers, it just makes my skin crawl. I mean, there's a few other writers that I count as friends, but even amongst them, sometimes it gets awkward. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, I can't say anything or he'll steal it. So when I meet with other writers, we generally talk about other writers who aren't there. Hey, you ever read this guy? So yeah, I'm not big on these things. I've never heard of this contest. I would never enter a contest like this. I just want to make stuff up and put it out there and have you folks decide whether it's good or not. That's all I really care about. I'm not out for awards or any kind of legacy or anything like that. I want a backlist is what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for, making enough money that I can keep doing this, that I can justify to my family, sitting here in this room, daydreaming all day. And I've never understood. I had this discussion years and years ago with Dean Mullaney, publisher at Eclipse. He was telling me about the mystery mafia and the Western mafia and the horror mafia. And they were basically writers who would hire each other to work on anthologies. Like, Joe Schlabotnik is going to edit this, and he's going to hire, Mary Chestnut to write the story, and then Mary will edit one next year and hire him to write a story. So, and we'll explain why in these anthologies you just see the same names over and over and over again. And he explained this to me because I was bemoaning the fact that there was a Horror Writers of America association, and I couldn't understand. I said, I didn't understand a Mystery Writers Association, because to me, mystery writers were like Dashiell Hammett or Cornell Woolrich or Jim Thompson, who were these like tortured loner characters, alcoholics and closeted homosexuals and stuff like that. They wouldn't want to meet other writers. They were writing by themselves, like there's this dirty little secret. I write for the pulps. I write mysteries. Why would they want to? They didn't want to. And I always thought that's what a writer was, and particularly for horror writers. Aren't horror writers supposed to be like these people with like these twisted personalities? You can't imagine Edgar Allan Poe sitting down with a bunch of contemporary writers of his time having tea. He'd creep them out. H.P. Lovecraft, he would write to other writers, but he wouldn't meet with other writers because he was a tortured loner with a lot of his own problems. And I always thought that's what writers are. They're outsiders, they're outliers. And I could never imagine belonging to an association It's like the profession that should never have a club, in my mind. And obviously, a lot of people think I'm wrong. So it's why I don't pay attention to the controversy of the Hugo Awards. Who cares? It doesn't affect me. So I just care about you, the reader. Not to be too trite about it, but it's true. It's true. I mean, your opinion, you sitting there listening to this right now, your opinion about any comic or novel I write or anything else, that's the only important thing to me. It's not recognition of a bunch of my peers that I don't care about. Now, it's nice to hear from another writer who I admire that he liked what I wrote. And certainly if I read something by a writer that I admire, I let them know about it. And I was like, yeah, I really enjoyed that. But other than that, nah, leave me alone. Quintuple spin. You hit it, man. You broke the bank at Monte Carlo, Josh. What's your favorite Tarantino film and why? Yeah, of course, I love Pulp Fiction. I have fond memories of going to see it on its opening weekend with my buddy Flint Henry. We just had the time of our lives. And I'd seen Reservoir Dogs, and quite frankly, it's a movie I never really want to see again. I mean, extended torture sequences, not my thing. But Pulp Fiction, amazing piece of work. Amazing piece of work. Remains to this day. I rewatched it recently, and it is good. I mean, can't beat this cast. Stellar cast. Terrific story. I like the anti-structure way it's told, and very, very cool stuff. Kill Bill. I love both Kill Bill movies. I can't even tell you how many times I went back to the movie theater to see these again and again and again. You ever go to the multiplex and you look at what's here? And you just go, well, I'm just going to go see that movie I saw before because I know that's good. And that was me. So I saw this movie. I saw both of these maybe half a dozen times in the theaters, and I've watched them since over and over again. And I've heard people complain that they're ridiculous and overindulgent on Tarantino's part, but I excuse it because he's overindulgent in an area that I would be overindulgent in too. I mean, I like everything about these things because he and I are approximately the same age. I think he's a little younger than me. And we were seeing the same kind of movies at the same kind of grindhouse theaters and digging them. And this is his homage to all of that. And all of the call outs and Easter eggs and everything in these movies, I responded to big time. I mean, it just blows me away that when Uma Thurman is on a jet and it's coming in for a landing in Tokyo, and we see past her out the window, and it's so obviously not the real city. It's like a model for a Godzilla movie. I mean, it's just that kind of stuff's just brilliant. And of course, this is violent as hell, which I always enjoy. So yeah, it's a favorite. But I gotta say, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, man, this is his masterpiece, and I'm not obviously I'm not the only one who said this. It's this heartfelt Hollywood fantasy, and I really, really, really like this movie, and I've watched it, multiple times. And it's the same overindulgent pop culture reference, dredged up from the mind of Tarantino kind of thing that we've seen before. But I always said Tarantino would never make a truly mature adult film. And he said the same thing. But this is a maturely made film, even though it's a complete fantasy. But it's a fantasy that we can all indulge in. And once again, he's overindulgent in spots. People have complained, that long sequence with DiCaprio shooting that TV Western. But again, it's so far in my wheelhouse, I didn't feel it was indulgent. I enjoyed every second of it. This fictional character actor appearing on an episode of Lancer. It's like I couldn't get enough. And all the side gags about Bruce Lee and Sharon Tate and all the rest of it. And it's it's the only real Tarantino film that is a feel-good movie, because it's like, yeah, this is the way the world should have been. This is what should have happened on that night, and the setup for it and everything else. It's just terrific filmmaking. I really dug it. One more thing. I recently posted this on X and on Facebook. I'm going to read it to you folks who aren't watching but listening. I posted, it's sad to see, hold on, I got some nonsense going on here. Okay, it's sad to see so many people I like go after each other, hammer and tongue. Settle down, everybody. It's comic books. And this was in response to this sniping, this shooting inside the tent amongst crowdfunders. And it's kind of weird because for me, because I don't pay a lot of attention to this stuff. Like I said, I think a writer is a loner, solitary figure. To that point, I didn't associate a lot or socialize at all when I was in comics. I would see people at conventions and go out to dinner, go out for lunch, whatever. That was fine. But like, I never went to the Christmas parties at DC and Marvel. I was always invited, but I never went. One time I went because a friend of mine was visiting and he really wanted to go. He says, "Can you go to that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can just show up and you can be my plus one." So he really wanted to go to the DC Christmas party. So we went, and it was fine because he was a charming, loquacious guy, and he covered for me, standing in the corner worried about saying something stupid. But I didn't want to mix personalities. I wanted my work to stand on its own. I wanted my work to stand on its merit, not because, I bought somebody a drink or I like the same music they like or whatever. I didn't want that to have anything to do. And I didn't want to do anything or say anything that would prejudice them against possibly assigning me work. And so I just sort of like let the work speak for itself, which I still do to this day. And what gets kind of weird is that I see, I can't help it. People bring this stuff to me. Did you see what so-and-so said about so-and-so? Did you hear what happened at the convention between this person and that person? And I'm not really that interested in it, but by osmosis, I'm sort of absorbing this. And of course, I see posts on X, particularly on X. I see posts on Facebook where these different crowdfunder guys are going at it. I mean, and they're getting personal. It's not like DC and Marvel, their little bit of, faux rivalry, mockery, whatever, which never got serious because, Stan Lee and Carmen Infantino had lunch together a couple of times a week, so DC and Marvel really didn't hate each other. And they were, exchanging artists and writers back and forth with such frequency. There was no real animosity between the two companies. But there's real, true, open warfare, hatred between so many of these crowdfunding guys. Not gals. I haven't seen any crowdfunding women. There's some very, very good, Charlie's London. Some awesome crowdfunding comics being created by the ladies, but they know better to get into this stuff. And the most disturbing thing about this is there are people that I like and admire, and in some cases work with or work for, who these are the ones going at each other. And it's like, this is like seeing your friends fighting. It's like, yeah, but I like all you guys. Why can't you get along? What's wrong with you? I begin to feel like the man with no name in Fistful of Dollars. I'm making money off of two rival factions, who hate each other. I'm wandering back and forth, picking up cash. And I'm like, I don't get it. There's room for everybody. And of course, it's the internet. So, you can post something, I love kittens, and 3 posts in, somebody's calling somebody else a racist. But, you got to think about the audience. And that's the thing, is that I don't want to see this become tribal. Somebody asked me on Facebook, I heard that back in the day in conventions, Marvel and DC fans would get in fist fights. I'm like, that never happened. Never. First of all, the kind of fans that were going to conventions in the late 60s, early 70s were not the fist fight type. And secondly, nobody got that passionate about it. It just didn't matter. Hey, like what you like. You know, you like the elongated man, then you like the elongated man. You know, I prefer Mr. Fantastic, and let's go our separate ways. You know, even the Uncle Scrooge versus Little Lulu crowd, you know, they never drew down on each other. There weren't rumbles in the alley. But now, because of the nature of the internet, where you can be anonymous, and you can have rabid followers who will attack people, especially if you encourage them, it's this toxic environment. And it shouldn't be, because just like back in the day with DC and Marvel, having a separate brand, and, you know, you liked what you liked. You made your choices. You know, you liked whole milk or you liked skim milk, you know, and that was it. You made your choice. And it didn't matter. If somebody else liked something else, God love you. And each one of these crowdfunding entities has its own fan base. I mean, that's how it exists. It has a fan base for that creator. Be it, and these are guys who don't get involved in this stuff, you know, be it Graham Nolan or Brian Pulido or Billy Tucci. You know, they got their own fan base, and their job number one is to please that fan base and to present stuff that their fans are going to enjoy, and of course that they enjoy creating. And, you know, I use those three as an example because I'm not going to name names on the rest of them. You know the names of the people that are all fighting each other and having daggers to each other's throats and making, you know, the most insane accusations about each other. But I chose those three because they don't get involved in that stuff. They're happy warriors, and they are doing very well. All three of those guys are doing very, very well and working very hard at it, and, you know, making their own way. And that's the model. You know, they each have their own fan base. I don't know how many people buy Brian Pulido stuff who also buy Graham stuff. Probably not many. There's probably not a lot of crossover. And amongst the half dozen or so crowdfunders who are constantly feuding, I don't think there's any crossover there either. I think, you know, they're definitely going for a different audience, going for a different taste, and that's the nature of the internet. Now, the problem is this toxic atmosphere is stoked by success. You know, you can make your brand hatred. We all know there are plenty of video channels that do nothing but, you know, bitch about pop culture. They attack this thing or that thing, and they do it over and over and over again because there's a ready audience who wants to have their own beliefs confirmed or reaffirmed. You know, yeah, this movie really sucked, and I'm going to go on and on and on about it. And then, you know, everybody else shows up to go, yeah, that really sucked, and here's why I think it sucked. And you sort of build up a thing. I'm leaving Critical Drinker out of this because you're probably thinking, oh, he's talking about Critical Drinker. No, Critical Drinker will eviscerate a bad movie, and the environment for bad movies that is so target rich. Who could resist? And of course, his thing is to take the movie apart. But the way that Critical Drinker does take the movie apart is so often instructive. I watch his videos as a writer because he has such a keen eye for why a story failed, why a movie failed, why this doesn't work. You know, just the interior at the core of this concept, it's awful. And why did they ever make it? And he examines it, and he does like an autopsy and just, you know, examines the anatomy of that story, and it's instructive. You know, yes, it's funny and often vicious, but it's instructive as well. I'm talking about people that they're just bitching for the sake of bitching, and they get, you know, thousands upon thousands of subscribers and you know, millions of subscribers and thousands upon thousands of views and become personalities on their own. Now that's their game, that's their thing, that's what they do, that's fine if that's what you want. But I think it's ultimately to the crowdfunding crowd and the comics crowd, it's destructive because it pits one against the other. As I said, it becomes tribal. I mean, quite frankly, if I were to turn this little show here into something of that nature, if I made it a, you know who I hate kind of thing, I probably have, you know, 10, 20 times the subscribers and views that I have, but I just don't want to do that. I think that the people that show up here, the relatively few people compared to these other shows that watch me right now, you right there in your car or in your office or wherever you're watching this, you know, I want your patronage. You know, you're interested in what I'm saying. You share some of my own interests. You want to get granular on some of this stuff. You have a curiosity that I try to satisfy with a lot of these questions, and I'm cool with that. You know, I like the audience I have. I don't want some imaginary audience that I have to stretch for or create material that I don't really want to create content that I myself don't like. I don't want to work real hard at this. This is a conversation between you and I, a one-sided conversation, but this is between you and I. So that's really all I got to say about it. I just caution, you know, open letter to anybody who's listening, to, you know, cool it, because you're hurting the medium and ultimately you're not. I mean, yeah, in the short run, you're helping yourself, but, you know, and in a lot of cases, it's about market share. It's about gaining attention to yourself and everything else. But there's got to be a better way. Just do the work and let it sell itself. Do the work, as I said before, quality will out. Readers will recognize quality. It might take a little bit more effort, and it's always an effort to present stuff on the internet because it's so cluttered with information by its very nature. But you will win through if you are conscientious, earnest, and consistently creating quality entertainment. And that's all I got to say on that subject. I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank you all for watching and subscribing and liking and all the rest. And I will see all of you, I hope, down the road.